times were different. That empire also lasted by conquest, by sacking the wealth of neighboring peoples. Go out and sack their wealth, and then instill some puppet regime there, call it a republic, and bring the wealth back home, and use the bread and circuses to keep the people happy and said,
right.
So that's the life cycle of it.
So it was more of a rapacious kind of time, which it wasn't a bad time, though. I mean, they did okay in their own practice.
So here we are today, where government has found its alchemy.
Okay.
The printing press.
Okay, and that was wonderfully true when I talked about this in 1922.
Right.
And subsequently, yes, a lot of other governments have done this. There's a wonderful line from one of the Chinese movies. A new government comes into place. We're just waiting to see the color of their currency. So the governments do this kind of stuff, by definition almost.
Yeah. We call that fiat money, by the way. Money that is not an emergent property. What comes from the market that emerges as money because the people use it in trade. It becomes money. That is what we call money, true money. What we call
commodity money.
Or specie.
Right.
And what government creates by law is called fiat money. And fiat basically means it's money because we say so. And one of my favorite economists has said that the future value of all fiat monies at some point in time is zero.
Correct.
This has never not been the case. The future value of the dollars, Federal Reserve notes in your pocket, will one day be zero.
Correct. Okay, so that gets us to some involvement with the bank, with banking systems that have evolved over the centuries. The original bankers were goldsmiths, people who had gold,
priests,
people who had money, and they could coin this stuff and get stuff for it, or they after a while could lend it out. Okay, so they would take gold and coin it into something and then lend it out to somebody else and charge interest and give some sort of return. So it was against what most of the religion, certainly Islam to this day does not allow interest.
Right, they call it usury.
Usury. And the Roman Catholic Church did the same. I'm not sure what happened under Orthodoxy, but Jews were allowed to deal in this kind of stuff, which is how they got into banking and into money more than the average Christian around them. So that was the initial kind of banking, was basically somebody minting gold into something that would grease the wheels, that would allow somebody to put their money to work and then lend it out to somebody who wanted to build something or to start a war with somebody or build a church or whatever they were into.
Sure. I think where you're at, I could actually go a step beyond that, a step further back, but probably to use the term banking per se, you're maybe a little more accurate. But initially, what I would consider banking was nothing more than warehousing.
Okay.
That people held their money, and they didn't have someplace safe to keep it, so they would either, and that's why I mentioned the priests. Often the churches were very big, solid buildings, and they had vaults and such, maybe, or businesses would pop up that had a vault in a very strong building in a secure place. And so people who wanted to protect their wealth would then put their money with this person, this institution, and they would actually pay a warehousing fee. Yes.
Right.
Instead of, they didn't get interest on keeping their money there. They paid this person to hold their money for them and protect it. And obviously that person then couldn't loan that money out because that stuff had to be there on demand.
Right.
So if everyone, say there's 100 ounces of gold total in there among 20 people, and on one day all 20 of them show up to
Right.
to withdraw their funds, every last grain of it has to be there and accounted for. It can't be out lent about and such.
Okay, so that's not banking at all, that's some sort of just warehousing.
Yeah,
And then
in
sometime it
economics they'll
passes
call
it
it
through.
banking in the early stages, but yeah, I
And
mean,
when-
an interesting thing came about from that, though, is that instead of going and getting, say I'm adding gold to my deposit account weekly,
Okay,
he gives me a certificate that certifies that I hold this gold in this account.
okay, good.
And those certificates sometimes would be traded.
Right.
The title of that gold, and the gold didn't physically move from the vault. The certificate moved from person to person.
And that was, it was not fiat money, it was just a certificate.
Right. It was
that
100% gold backed.
Right,
Okay. And then as it evolves, the warehouser or banker begins to look at this vault full of gold he's got sitting there, and he sees all of these certificates that he has out there, and he sees that people are trading in these, and he realizes people aren't coming for this money. I could probably lend
Yes.
a portion of it out, make some money on it. What's the chances that everybody's going to show up on the same day wanting their money
Correct.
back? There you enter into what we call fractional reserve banking.
Yes. And that is the source of the multiplier effect, where ultimately you have
Yes.
every dollar that's out there of real money of some sort of keeps on cycling back through and through, and with a 20% reserve requirement.
I think it's 8 or 10 right now. Last I remember.
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
10.
they've tried to.
So if
stimulate
you've got
the economy.
$1,000 in the bank, okay, the bank is actually required to have probably $100 of that actually available to you. The rest of it doesn't exist.
That's not the same as the capital requirements. The capital requirements are about 8%. So the bank has to have wealth. They have to have capital. So that might be their building, that might be cash in the vault, might be cash held with the Federal Reserve. They have to do that. But they have got to have, that has to be added to 8%. But of their entire deposits, they have to keep something in the range of, I thought it was closer to 20% with the Federal Reserve.
That would be a 20% reserve requirement, and it's not that.
It's,
So we could,
I don't know, I tried to find that number out, and it simply gets lost in the work somewhere.
the
But-
point is clear anyway, right? That
Right.
the money isn't there, and if you and I were bankers and following this historical path we just kind of laid out, and you and I started to then realize that we could make a whole lot of money by
Right.
only keeping a portion of these people's money that they're paying us to hold there,
Right.
and we can lend that out and make interest on it. Okay, once that word gets out, people say, I'm going to that bank to get my money out while I can.
Right.
Right.
A run on the bank.
Right. And in free market banking, this is debated among economists and such as to whether fractional reserve even could exist in free markets. I argue certainly it could. It's got to be disclosed to you, right? That's a contract.
Right.
That you put your money with us. We're not holding all of it. It could, but I don't think it would. I can't imagine it being. I wouldn't bank with it. If you did, you'd want to be very responsible for knowing where those funds are, what they've got it invested in, right?
Right.
So I look at you as more as a investment consortium if you're joining something
Right.
like that.
A mutual fund of some sort.
Right. So here you have all of these banksters going wild, and occasionally one of them gets a little too far out of hand. Customers run on the bank closes, it's out of business. And as ugly as fractional reserve banking is, at least in a free market, there are consequences, and the ones that go the most awry go out of business. There's where the Federal Reserve comes in.
Right.
That's when you bring in the state